Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Purdue fell to Texas A&M in the Indy Classic, but is there real reason for pessimism about the 8-3 Boilermakers? We'll discuss Saturday's loss before jumping into Barry Odom's first week at Purdue, where he addressed the fans and the media. The schedule came out, the transfer portal news continued. Lots to get to on the football side after we talk about basketball. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Always can send in questions there on Twitter. You can also email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Come hang out, join the conversation. Always have a lot of fun there. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. Going to start with the basketball side of things today. Lots of reaction to Purdue's 70-66 loss to Texas A&M in the Indy Classic. Really a game where you felt like Purdue just needed to go on a run. And I think Purdue was down a couple points at half, maybe 4. A&M came out in the second half and got that thing up to 10, maybe 12. Purdue came right back and took the lead for a second. And then I don't know that Purdue led again. Purdue made some pushes, but it never was able to get over the hump. Had a really cold stretch in the second half that did it in. So Purdue's at 8-3 on the season now. In this game, A&M did a great job at getting Purdue out of sorts on the offensive end. Purdue got nothing going in the half court. And while turnovers were a part of that, even when Purdue didn't turn the ball over, it really had to labor to get good looks. Took forever to get Trey Kaufman-Renn involved. Purdue was not able to make the post a strength for it. And when was the last time you said that about Purdue? Even in games, Purdue is always so good at getting the ball into the post, but Texas A&M blew that up. Early on, Texas A&M was hard hedging Braden Smith as much as you really can. And Purdue had some good looks from 3, didn't go in. Purdue shot all right from 3. It's not like Purdue lost this game because it didn't shoot well from 3. A couple misses late inflated that, to 9 for 26. But, Purdue shot okay. But, man, if it could have hit a couple early on and made Miles Colvin and Cam Heide get a little more respect from A&M. They were selling out to keep Fletcher Lawyer from getting open threes. They really didn't want Braden Smith to get open threes. Texas A&M did a really good job, and that's a team that has a combination of length, athleticism, and uber experience. 4 of those 5 starters for Texas A&M are graduate students, guys who are in their 5th or 6th year. That's a really nice combination to have. I mean, that's why Texas A&M is, one of the better teams in the country this year. Top 25, sitting at 19 in KenPom. Pretty legit. Good defensive team. A&M wasn't a great shooting team coming in. It shot well. But, this is another example, if you ask me, of what Purdue opens itself up to when it challenges like this in the non-conference schedule. This is as difficult of a non-conference schedule as you can ask for. This is a game where Purdue could have easily brought Chicago State into Mackey on Saturday. Purdue would have won by 50. Everyone goes home happy. That's not the approach Purdue is taking here. Now, will Purdue be better off come February, come March because of this? I know Matt Painter sure thinks so. I think it's quite reasonable to think that's the case. I mean, through 11 games here, Purdue has played 5 of KenPom's top 25 as of right now here on Sunday night. Ole Miss is hanging on at 24, Maryland, Texas A&M, Marquette, Alabama, and then Purdue plays the number 1 team in KenPom next weekend in Auburn. So, at this point, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You've beaten 3 teams in KenPom's top 25, 3 games that could be quadrant 1 wins all season. This is a team that look, it has its flaws. I mean, there are reasons to be concerned, sure. The front court is a big question mark. And you're not that much closer to answers than you were a month ago when Daniel Jacobson got hurt. Caleb First is really struggling. He is not getting anything going. He's not finishing around the basket well. It's been a real rough go of things. I had wondered, maybe with a kind of a niche role, can he contribute a couple baskets a game just cleaning up around the basket? And to this point, consistently, that answer has been no. He's had some good games. He's had some good moments, but another rough one on Saturday. Will Berg is really struggling. I don't like to use one game and one stat to judge things, but Will Berg played 10 minutes on Saturday and didn't come up with a rebound. Didn't have a shot attempt. One steal, one block, 2 fouls in 10 minutes. That's not much. There's not much meat on that bone. It's been a rough year. He's 11 of 12 from the floor, but he's not someone who can go create on his own. You kind of have to get him the ball in a really advantageous spot on the block. This area is a struggle for Purdue as a whole. Raleigh Burgess doesn't play on Saturday. He's someone who I think there is reason to be optimistic in the future, but for right now, it's not there. He's not ready to be a big contributor right now. Maybe that even changes this season. I don't know. Trey Kaufman-Renn is a good player, and he had a rough day on Saturday. Texas A&M rattled him as much as I think you can rattle a guy like that. Kaufman-Renn's a pretty heady guy. He's not one who's, uber emotional or anything, but you could tell he was a little flustered. He's not the imposing force that Purdue had the last few years at center. And it's not fair to expect him to be, because nobody is Zach Edey. That's why Zach Edey was as special as he was, because you're not going to find another one of him. But Purdue doesn't have that get out of jail free card down there where, even with doubles, Zach Edey could still score. Or teams would have to double so obnoxiously and aggressively that Purdue would get a really good shot a lot. That's not been the case so far. You have an elite point guard in Braden Smith. You have one of the more underrated players out there in Fletcher Loyer. But Purdue does not have an abundance of real dynamic playmakers. Braden Smith is that. Fletcher Loyer can make some plays on his own. I don't know how dynamic he is, but you saw it on Saturday against Texas A&M. He can do damage off the bounce, more than people give him credit for. But to this point, Miles Colvin and Camden Heide have not shown the ball handling ability to attack off the bounce, to attack closeouts. You haven't seen it. And I know, you can make the argument, well, Purdue needs to force them to do it, but if they can't do it, there's no point in having that happen on the court. CJ Cox has some juice to him, but he's a freshman, and you've seen the ups and downs. He had a nice day on Saturday after he had a really, really rough day against Maryland last time out. It's just some of the ups and downs here. It's not a great defensive team that Purdue can fall back on. It does some okay things, but it's not a great perimeter defensive team, and you don't have that rim protector. That's a spot where Daniel Jacobson's really missed. Not that he was going to be Zach Edey, not that he was going to be Dikembe Mutombo, but he'd be better than what Purdue has at rim protection now. Because that front court, to me, is the root of where Purdue's question marks come. Now, would you love to have another high-level guard? Sure. They don't grow on trees. You already have two. But, there's no shortage of mass panic. If you scroll through Twitter or message boards here, Purdue fans are really upset about this. And almost to a point I didn't expect. Purdue's 8-3, and while it's not been perfect, it's still in a pretty good spot. But a couple of things here. Number one, Purdue's scheduled this way with this as a very possible outcome, almost welcoming this as a possible outcome. The last 2 years, it hasn't turned out that way. Purdue has beaten the system and scheduled really aggressively and just beaten everyone they played. And if you just kind of play the numbers there after going undefeated in non-conference 2 years in a row, this was kind of due. Matt Painter believes in the idea of a more difficult non-conference schedule. You see teams across the country do it. Some do, some don't. But you do see that this isn't, him being a lone wolf here. This is a good team. This isn't a great team. After losing what you did last year, and when you are not an NIL giant that is out in the portal super actively, this is a pretty good spot to be in, man. You lost Zach Edey, the best player in school history. You can make an argument the best college basketball player in the last couple decades. You lost Lance Jones and Mason Gillis, a pair of really high-level role players from last year's team. I mean, that's a lot to lose. And you're not a recruiting ranking school. Purdue never has been. You're not a big spender in the portal. I don't know whether Purdue has that capability or not. I have no reason to believe that it does. But, right now, Purdue's a pretty clear top 25 team. And if that's where you're at after a really, really big season when you lose a lot, you're in a pretty good spot. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Purdue can still improve throughout the season. I know I made the comparison on Twitter to the 2018-2019 season. When I walked out of Gainbridge Fieldhouse, just like I did yesterday, back in 2018, it was after Notre Dame, I think, put up almost 90 points on Purdue and beat them pretty comfortably. And Purdue was 6-5. You weren't feeling very good about where Purdue was. Were you sure that Purdue was going to make the tournament? Maybe, maybe not. But that team got better and better and better. And while I know the dynamics are a little different, Carson Edwards was unlike anything this team has, for better or worse. People forget the games where that was for worse. There were a lot of those. The for better just happened at the best time possible. Travion Williams really came onto the scene second half of that year to help out in that front court that was struggling with Matt Harms and Evan Boudreau as your guys. But, look, this is, again, this is what it is. You are not going to have the perfect team every year. Just look at some of these NCAA tournament streaks. Look at some of these, teams that have been achieved certain benchmarks the last so many years. Purdue's up there with a lot of them. Can Purdue still win the Big Ten? I think so. Can Purdue still win a few games in the NCAA tournament? Yeah, I think so. And if you get to the point where, boy, you look at the end of the year and Purdue's in the Sweet 16 having won the Big Ten, it's hard to ask for much more than that. It really is. And I know the national title made you hungry for more and more and more. Maybe that's next year for Purdue. But, right now I think you've got to be pretty okay with where Purdue is at. I talked about the portal last week, so I'm not gonna dive back into that. If you didn't get to last week's episode, I talked a lot about why Purdue probably couldn't have been super active in the portal last year. Daniel Jacobson getting hurt changed things. Cannon Catchings leaving changed things. But, hey, 8-3. You go to Auburn, and that's going to be a brutal game. Ken Pom has Auburn as like one of his highest rated teams of all time right now. So that's fun. That's going to be a really difficult challenge. But, you close out there, you beat Toledo, and you go into the new year at 9-4. And while maybe that's not what you would have signed up for right at the start of the year, it's far from worst case scenario. And if Purdue can kind of maintain on its path here, and you're in the top 25 and you're competing for the Big Ten, I think you're kind of just showing the stability of this program right now at a really high level. 2024 is coming to an end, and there were so many highlights of this year. While it may not have qualified as a highlight, did you review your insurance coverages with a professional this year? If not, give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com. We will go over your current insurance program for free with no obligation to even receive a quote. And we'll talk some Purdue sports in the process. Reach out today and we'll knock it out before the end of the year, no matter where you are in Indiana. That's about all I've got on basketball, though. We got a question at the end about that Auburn game. But Barry Odom had his first week in West Lafayette. Really a true week now, Sunday to Sunday. Had his press conference Tuesday morning. And, you know, the classic win the press conference phrase gets thrown out a lot. But as far as someone can win the press conference, Barry Odom did. It was not a slick sales pitch. It wasn't some rehearsed, profound speech that he gave. It wasn't anything, you know, out of left field. It was clear, it was concise, it was professional, it was straightforward. It's very obvious that this is someone who's been a head coach before. All business. All business. And this is someone who has done SEC media days. He's dealt with an SEC media base, getting some bigger city coverage there at Mizzou, you know, with St. Louis and Kansas City. He didn't come out with any grand proclamations. He didn't come out with any bold statements. He made it clear what he expects. The idea with this, Barry Odom's a tough guy. It's going to be a tough football team. It wants to be a well-coached football team. It wants to do the little things well. And he very much talked about the growth over his time at Purdue. Really not shying away from anything. Talking about, you know, putting yourself in position to make a playoff and to compete in the Big Ten. He seems like a pretty blue-collar dude. Nothing flashy. And that aligns well with what Purdue has historically been. That's kind of how Joe Tiller was. That's certainly how Jeff Brom was. On the basketball side, absolutely how Gene Cady and Matt Painter are. Very focused on results. Very, you know, substance over style. And for Purdue and for Purdue's fans, I think that is very welcomed. I think that is something that Purdue fans wanted to see. I thought it was very notable. In his press conference, he addressed right away the notion that he's a defensive guy, acknowledging that, you know, while he cut his teeth on the defensive side of the ball, he wants this to be a team with a big offense. I know there's always that skepticism that with a defensive head coach, this is going to be a ball control offense that's 3 yards in a cloud of dust and winning the game 13-10 by pinning your opponent deep. But when you look at his history, he threw the ball around a bunch with Drew Lock when he was at Missouri. He had the up-tempo go-go offense at UNLV. That's a pretty good track record for not leaning into a defensive style of football. He wants this to be an offense that puts up points. And to complement that, he brought up an aggressive attacking style of defense. And, you know, that's what's been historically successful at Purdue too. Kind of the idea of the defensive ends, you know, the den of defensive ends by going out and pressuring the passer. And in this type of offense and this type of defense, you know, you're going to give up some points, but can you also create a couple sacks, create a couple turnovers, and get your offense back out there and build up a lead? I think this is a style of football that will please Purdue fans and is something that, if you're on the Purdue side of things, should make you feel pretty good. Another storyline from that press conference, and I guess the little pep rally, I thought the Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. during finals week was an interesting time to host something in Mackey Arena introducing Barry Odom, but hey, whatever. Mung Chang grabbed the mic and talked for a little bit and was very, very clear about his goal that Purdue is going to be successful in athletics and that football needs to be good. I don't know that I really question this. I never viewed Ryan Walters as Purdue not being committed to football. I think Purdue just missed on the hire. I think that's all it was. I don't think Purdue tried to go cheap. I think Purdue was trying to hit a 5-run grand slam, something that's virtually impossible, but it was trying to do something crazy. And when you look at what's happened here at Purdue, it's vastly improved Ross-Ade Stadium. The football performance center is great. Matt Painter and the basketball program, great commitment there. I do think NIL still has a ways to go. If you believe some of the numbers that are out there, not great. Purdue's got a ways to go there, but Purdue does want to win from the top. And you see this as Barry Odom gets a 6-year, $39 million deal. That's going to be the highest paid coach in Purdue history. And I would assume the highest paid employee in Purdue history. Purdue is putting some real money into football here. Sounds like there's not a real cap to the assistant pool, so Purdue's not going to shy away there. This is real, legitimate commitment to football from Purdue, no matter how you look at it. Mike Babinski confirmed that Purdue's going to be committing to the full revenue share distribution, which, it's $20.5 million is, I think, the projection on that. And by all accounts, this is something that's going to lean very heavily towards football. I've seen the thought that maybe 15 million of that 20.5 could be earmarked to football. It's not going to put Purdue on par with other members of the Big Ten because NIL still is going to be a factor here, but it's going to help even out the playing field a little bit and bridge some of that existing gap. And, that should help Purdue, I think. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy, but it should help. This week, the schedule was announced for 2025 for the Big Ten. We already knew what the non-conference was going to look like, but we did not know what the Big Ten schedule was going to look like. We knew Purdue's opponents. We didn't know when they would be. It's challenging. It is probably not as overwhelming as this past year. Now, we probably didn't realize how overwhelming the schedule would be this year when it first came out, because I don't think anyone thought Indiana would be a top 10 team. But you knew Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, going to Wisconsin, going to be a tough schedule. And when you look at this upcoming year, I'm not really going to read it aloud. Not a good listening experience. It's impossible to start talking win total when we have no idea what the roster is going to look like. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about win totals or anything like that or what record would be good. But I do have thoughts on scheduling dynamics because this is something I pay a lot of attention to. USC in week 3 presents a really nice opportunity for Purdue. Purdue should be 2-0. It opens up with Ball State and Southern Illinois. Ball State just fired its coach. The Butler guy is there now. And Southern Illinois went 4-8 in the FCS this year. Purdue should be 2-0. USC comes to town. It is significantly better than Purdue. I'm not going to deny that. USC is a much better team than Purdue. Crazy things can happen, though. That is in an interesting spot under Lincoln Riley there. I don't know how I feel about where USC is right now. It has not been the start, certainly the last 2 years, that Lincoln Riley hoped for at USC. That game, does it get flexed to a Friday night? I certainly could see it. I don't know. It's either that or maybe you get one of the decent windows for that with USC, and if you're 2-0, I don't know. But that's a big opportunity to kind of do something to make a statement, even if you don't win, to make a statement, hey, we're not messing around anymore. After USC, you get Notre Dame, and you're going up to South Bend. It's going to be rough. That's going to be a really difficult game, but you get a bye after Notre Dame, and that's a really good break. If you look at the numbers of teams that play Notre Dame the week after, they really struggle. And you saw that dynamic take place this year. Certainly didn't help that Purdue had to fly out to Corvallis, Oregon, but holistically, teams do not play well the week after they play Notre Dame. That is real. That's a real thing. So you get a bye week there. You'll have played 4 games, 3 non-conference, 1 home conference game, and then you'll get to rest up for a month of October that looks pretty favorable. Illinois, at Minnesota, at Northwestern, Rutgers. Keep in mind that game at Northwestern, that's at your little stadium on the lake there. So that's not a big crowd factor. There's like 15,000 people there. Plenty will be Purdue fans. It's hard to project how good these teams will be because all of these teams are kind of in that group of Purdue where I think you can have good years. I don't know how well you can sustain your good years. And I believe that we talked about this last week. I don't think expecting to be 6-6 every single year is realistic anymore. I think for all of these teams, your good years where maybe you're winning 8 games, that's going to come with a downturn where maybe you win 3 or 4. There's a real situation here where you load up and have that right team to make a push, and then you lose a lot of guys and you fall back, and then you build up again. I think that is awfully realistic. But, again, there are going to be ebbs and flows here. Illinois at home, can you bounce back? I saw Luke Altmaier's coming back. Minnesota had a really nice year this year. Northwestern, not great. Rutgers, I think they lose a lot. I'm not positive. Can you finally beat Rutgers? They've only played twice since Rutgers joined the Big Ten, but Rutgers is 2-0 against Purdue. That's kind of one you have to have. November is brutal, and it's rough that you get Michigan and Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. That's miserable. Go to Ann Arbor. I think Michigan's going to be notably improved. Ohio State is Ohio State. And then after you finish those 2, you go to Washington. I don't know how good Washington will be. Washington wasn't that good this year. But this is flying to Seattle in mid-November as your 7th game in 7 weeks. 7 straight weeks without a bye. That is rough. That is like the ultimate scheduling dynamic that you want to pay attention to. You're flying 3 time zones, playing your 7th straight game. That's a tough spot. You have a bye week before the bucket game. I don't think that's super favorable. Yes, I know you want to lock into that game as much as you can, but I mean, you can only do so much at that point. I don't know how many players you're getting back for one game, especially if you're not in a spot to go bowling. I don't know that there's much benefit to having your bye week there. I think you'd rather have it a couple weeks earlier, but another 2-bye season. So Purdue will get that before it takes on Indiana. All in all here, it's not a miserable schedule that you look at and just say, oh no. It is one that's still difficult. That game at Notre Dame, I'm telling you guys, Purdue's got to figure out something here. You go over to fbschedules.com, my favorite site, and you look out at some of these future non-conference games with North Carolina, Wake Forest, Ole Miss, more with Notre Dame. Purdue's got to find a way out. Purdue cannot do this. This is just asking too much of yourself when you're already in a tough spot. But we'll see what happens there. Plenty of challenge ahead for Purdue next year. And then I wanted to close out the football segment here with some transfer portal stuff. I kind of had all this ready to go, and then Dylan Thieneman committed to Oregon last night. Look, I'm sure he's coming out well financially. I mean, it's Oregon. Phil Knight's kind of made it pretty clear, but look, it's hard to blame someone for this. Of course, it stings for Purdue fans. You have someone in Dylan Thieneman whose two brothers played at Purdue, whose family has been very into Purdue. But this is not the end of the world. Dylan Thieneman's a good player. Dylan Thieneman had an All-American season at Purdue, and it's never fun to lose a guy who has done a lot at your school. But this is a complete teardown. This is tearing the program down to the studs and starting fresh. You know, you've seen Will Helt taking a visit to Clemson, Max Clare taking a visit to Texas A&M. If I had to guess, those guys aren't going to come back. Maybe they will. But even if they don't, it's going to be okay. The portal is always something where if a decent player goes in, he's going to have some really good opportunities. And long-term for Purdue, you've got to get to the point where these guys aren't going in the portal. This was inevitable this year. When you have coaching changes, it's going to be. And that juice for Purdue was certainly worth the squeeze. And some of the portal casualties that may come with it, you got to live with it. You had to make a move. You had no choice here. But Purdue's going to have a brand new roster next year, whether it holds on to a couple of these guys or not. And some of Purdue's best players next year, you may or may not know their names right now. They may or may not be in West Lafayette. It's going to look very new. And sometimes that's a bad thing. Sometimes that's a good thing. I think right now it's a pretty good thing. Not that Dylan Thieneman went to Oregon, but the roster is going to look very new. Some positions to watch here in the portal. Purdue has brought in 5 kids from UNLV since Barry Odom took the job, high school recruits. As Purdue gets active in the transfer portal here, a few positions to keep an eye on. Obviously, quarterback is number one. Ryan Brown and Marcos Davila are in the portal. So the only scholarship quarterbacks you have in the fold are Bennett Meredith and Garrett Odom. Barry Odom's son, going to be a true freshman. Bennett Meredith has played in 1 game at Purdue, I think, maybe 2. That's it. And even if Brown and Davila both opted to return to Purdue, you still need a quarterback. You still need a starter. You can't go into next year with one of those as your projected starter, if you ask me. You saw Sawyer Anderson just earlier today reopen his recruitment. He was the quarterback signee in this class, but for whatever reason, that's not going to take place now. So you need at least one. If Brown and Davila don't come back, you probably need 2 or 3. We'll see what happens here. But if you're looking to overachieve here in year 1, you need someone you look at as an above-average Big Ten quarterback, because you are not going to have above-average talent at that many positions on the field, but quarterback can be the great equalizer sometimes, or it can at least make a giant difference compared to other positions. Purdue's got to get a good guy there. Offensive line, you're replacing all 5 of your starting offensive linemen. And this was not an offensive line that rotated. This was playing the same 5 guys pretty much every snap of every game. Corey Stewart, DJ Wingfield, Gus Hartwig, those guys are all out of eligibility. Marcus Bowe is hitting the NFL draft. Muhammad Musa is headed to Louisville. So, you bring back Joey Tanona. I've heard some all right things about Jaden Ball. Couple other guys, Ethan Trent, Jimmy Liston. There are a few other names in there, but Purdue's going to need a lot of help, especially at the tackle spots. That's going to be a key one. Linebacker is a position on this roster that doesn't really exist right now. Kydron Jenkins is out of eligibility. Yanni Karlaftis is in the portal. all you really have is like Hudson Miller and Owen Davis. You got to add a number of guys here. I don't know that Barry Odom has really committed to a defensive scheme, but he did some 4-3 alignment stuff at UNLV. If he wanted to do that, I mean, God, you need a handful plus of linebackers at this point just to fill out that room to play that style. Something to watch. And then special teams. Keelan Crimmins hopped in the portal this week. That would be a sizable loss. I think he was Purdue's best player this year. I say that half jokingly, half serious. He was really good. That would be a big loss, and that tells you why Purdue went 1-11. How do you feel about the kicker situation here? Do you feel good enough about Spencer Porath? I don't know. It was a rough year. It was not smooth sailing. Do you bring in some competition? Area to watch there. I would expect here this week that Purdue gets really ramped up in the portal. I think Purdue's going to make some coordinator hires here soon, and that's going to help kind of get that going. But it's, these guys have another couple weeks to enter the portal, I think. 29th maybe. So up till then, guys are going to come in, guys are going to be taking visits, making decisions, and we'll see where Purdue's at there. Couple of Q&A questions here to close things out. Do you have any concern about the lack of news that has come from Purdue football since the hire? Not a lot in terms of recruits, assistants, transfers, etc. I don't know that I would say concern. I am a little surprised we haven't heard anything on coordinators yet, unless he's got something big up his sleeve. And I don't know that. I don't know what to expect. But if Barry Odom does have something big on the horizon and you have to wait for bowl games or conversations to happen or, awards from this past week or something, I don't know. But I am a little surprised that Purdue has not announced any coordinators yet. As far as, player personnel stuff, 5 guys over from UNLV is probably about what I expected. I don't know that Barry Odom would want all of those guys at the Big Ten level, but if you can take some of the ones you feel better about, some of the ones that Odom has a relationship with, then that would really help. Transfers, again, a little bit. Now, UNLV does have a bowl game. Maybe some guys are wanting to play in that. I think that's this week. If I remember right, that's an early bowl game, so you may see some action there. And then maybe this upcoming weekend becomes a big portal weekend. It's still a few days ahead of Christmas. Do you get some guys in there? You only have so many weekends to get guys in here before the spring semester, so I wouldn't be surprised if Purdue had a lot going on there. Who is your OC wish list if Odom's OC doesn't come from UNLV? By all accounts, it's not going to be Brendan Marion. Purdue is not going to be going from the sounds of things. Sounds like kind of a multifaceted issue there. I know that Matthew Sluka NIL fiasco, so to speak, is part of that. I don't know that I have some hot board of candidates, but you want it to be someone Barry Odom is intrinsically familiar with, someone Barry Odom has great confidence in, to take over that side of the ball and, for lack of a better term, deliver competence, because that's what Purdue needs right now. Deliver an offensive game plan that can go neutralize some of the talent disadvantages you're going to have in some of these games. Someone who's called plays before, someone who knows how to push the ball downfield. Odom's worked with guys like that, so that's kind of where I would go. And then finally, closing out on the hoops side, what does Purdue have to do to beat Auburn? Purdue's got to shoot it at a really high level. I mean, this is a game Purdue's going to have to really score to win. I mean, I'm looking at KenPom right now. Purdue's an 11-point underdog to Auburn. I cannot tell you the last time Purdue was an 11-point underdog in a game on KenPom. Years. 3 3-4 years? Gotta be. Purdue's got to shoot really well. Auburn's a really good team. Really, really good team. Number 1 in offensive efficiency, number 13 in defensive efficiency. Really, really good. Purdue's got to score. I mean, it's probably a game where it takes 80 to win. You've got to take care of the basketball. Same deal. I mean, you can't have those pick 6 turnovers. Can't lead to runouts. Can't give them easy stuff. Keep Johnny Broome off the glass. He just had 20 rebounds on Saturday. 21 points, 20 rebounds in a blowout win over Ohio State. He is Ken Palm's early leader in his Player of the Year race. Guy's a stud. And Purdue's got to keep him off the glass. It's going to be a lot. I mean, it's a big ask, but, again, this is the way Purdue wants to schedule, and there are some real benefits from that. By scheduling this way, you hope you see that benefit later in the season. And if you do, I think folks are going to forget about what frustration there was from some here in December. But that's all I've got for today. Next week, I am going to do a kind of a look back at 2024, year in review, the highs and lows. I'm going to record that before I hit the road for some holiday travel. I'll schedule it to post on Monday. I will record it before that, though, so I probably won't have thoughts on the Auburn game in that episode. But go ahead and send over any of your best memories of 2024. I think I know what those are. I think I know what the worst ones are. But kind of send over your questions, your thoughts. I'll dive into it, probably record that Thursday evening. But until then, guys, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. You can always send me questions there or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Talk to you next week, guys. Until then, take care.